the best tool, in my humble opinion, to deal with mites in a general way and to make it easier for you as beekeepers to deal with mite treatments, whatever they might be, are screen bottom boards. And here's one. This is the one that I use. This is a commercial screen bottom board. Some of you met the producer at one of our meetings a few months ago. And I've had these in my hives for 5 years or so. And they, the initial benefit, well, there's two initial benefits. One is that mites naturally drop off the bees. They have claws and they hook onto the bee exoskeleton, but they let go once in a while, and then they fall down. And if you have a regular wooden bottom board, they very easily crawl right back up and get on the bees again. But if you have a screen bottom board, they drop through further down and they can't get back up so easily, if at all. So that's the number one benefit. Number two is ventilation. One of the biggest problems in our area, which is not the best area for beekeeping. If you had to pick an area for beekeeping, you probably wouldn't pick here, but we have bees and we want to keep them. So we got to deal with the climate. And the damp, humid climate and long wet winters are a problem, because the bees ventilate the hive by fanning their wings, and they kind of gang together and they pick out airways inside the hive. So they'll fan from the entrance up to hopefully some vent in the back of the hive, the upper back of the hive. But sometimes that's not enough if you have a wood bottom board. And this way the whole bottom of the hive is open. So for the moment I have a plastic slider in here, but almost all year long in my hives, and most people who use these, they just leave them open. So the whole bottom of the hive is essentially open. The only time I close them off is when I'm treating the bees for mites and when it's viciously cold. If it's going to be below 25 for an extended time, then I'll put the slider in. Otherwise, all winter long, I leave them open. And the bees can deal with that. Bees can deal with cold very easily, but they can't deal very well with long periods of damp, especially if rain gets inside your hive and there's no way for it to go. The bees can't deal with that extra moisture. And then mold starts to grow, and you have a perfect situation for certain diseases, for instance nosema, to grow inside the hive. So you want to keep it in a condition where the bees can ventilate it. And you can make these. There's gajillions of sets of plans online, so you can make these. Some of the people here, I think, have made them with John. And I'm all thumbs when it comes to wood, so I like to buy them. And this unit here has been thought out completely. The people took a long time to develop this, and so for me, it's worth it using that. And one thing you can do, this slider board is pretty versatile. You can put it on the top, so if you're treating with an acid, any volatile acid like formic acid, oxalic acid, you can protect the screen and also keep the acid fumes inside the hive so they don't just drop out the bottom. And some of the, like formic acid, will, after a number of years, will damage the screen and you have to replace it, which is a pain. Or you can put it underneath like that, so the screen is on top. So if you're treating with powdered sugar, which I do every year about this time, and I haven't done it yet because it's been too rainy. So you want it to be, at least a little bit better weather than we've been having. But then when you treat with powdered sugar, which Jody will demonstrate later, but when you treat it, basically you're having this rain of powdered sugar going down through the frames, and it drops through the screen. And then all you have to do to clean it off, because you don't want it to stay in there for very long, is take out the slider, get rid of the powdered sugar and mites, then you put the slider back in after it's been cleaned and greased or somehow made sticky. for 24 hours, so you can get a mite count, which is something you have to know. You have to know how many mites are in there, because as I said, there's a minimal number of mites that the bees can deal with sustainably. But you go over that minimal level for very long, and then the bees start to get diseased, and then eventually the hive will crash and die. So you have to know what that level is. And this is one way of telling. You can count, after you've treated, say, with powdered sugar, you can put the slider in, take it out in 24 hours, count the mites. You don't have to count all of them. You can divide it in fours or however you want to do it. And then you can use some very simple math to figure out, by multiplication, roughly how many mites you're dealing with. And that gives you an idea how much more you have to treat. Maybe, if luck is with you, you don't have very many mites, and so you're using the first powdered sugar treatment as a diagnostic method. But more than likely you'll have a whole bunch of mites, and so you have to continue with more powdered sugar treatments 5 to 7 days later and 5 to 7 days later. Usually I do 3 or 4 treatments to get the mite level down. And as Jody will tell you, powdered sugar treatments only deal with phoretic mites. Phoretic mites are the mites on the surface of the bees and inside, free in the hive. They don't deal with the breeding mites inside the capped cells. So it's just a stopgap measure. Works pretty good. It's not as effective as some of the more drastic chemicals that we use. But for this time of year, for the springtime, hopefully going into the honey season, it's a pretty good thing to do. And it's real easy, it's really cheap, you can get it anywhere. I buy it by, I buy a gajillion bags at a time at cash and carry. And one little tip, which hopefully Jody will tell you too, never open the bags until exactly the time you're going to use them, because powdered sugar is really hygroscopic. It just sucks up water like crazy. And then it doesn't sift over the bees very well. And with powdered sugar, it's not the sugar that does the trick, it's the size of the particle. Then there's two things that it does. It makes the bees want to groom like crazy, because you have all these little white bees and they want to be, they want to be their normal color. So they're grooming like crazy, and in the process they groom off the mites, and the mites fall down through the screen and you get rid of them. The other thing is that the mites can't hold their grasp through that particular size of particle. So it's the size of particle. You could actually use any one of a number of powdered minerals that are not toxic to the bees that have that same particle size, and it would work just as effectively. It just so happens that sugar is cheap, because we have big agriculture, and so you can get sugar anywhere. It's available, and so why not use it? So screen bottom boards, really good idea. Look online, build your own, or buy these. I'll just put in a little plug for these guys. When they came here, they sold seconds in blems, which I can't for the life of me figure out what's wrong with them, but for 30 bucks a piece. And they're still doing that online, so you can buy them for 30 bucks a piece online at their website. Later on, if you want to know more, their brochure is right here. Okay, so that's one of the first things in the season that I do about mites. The very first thing I do, and hardly anybody does this because they don't really see that it's effective, but I smoke the bees with black walnut leaves. And there are certain leaves and plants that have miticidal properties. They'll kill mites, or they'll, get them out of the hive. And one of the very best one, and there was kind of an informal study done about 10 years ago and published in the American Bee Journal. The very best one is grapefruit tree leaves. Unfortunately, we don't have a whole lot of grapefruit trees growing here. So number 2 was black walnut leaves, and it's a pretty effective miticide, but about the same as powdered sugar. It doesn't get rid of the whole problem, but it's a way to get started. So I happen to have a neighbor with a black walnut tree, and I rake up the leaves, and I put them in a mesh bag, and I dry them, and then I pack them into a bucket. And I can get a couple years worth of leaves packed into here.